delighted that you have found the Mindset Mentor Meets podcast. I'm Angela Cox, your host and indeed the Mindset Mentor, and I'll be interviewing executives and founders at the top of their game to find out what lies beneath. I want to know what makes people proud, how they define success, what holds them back, and indeed what drives them forward. This is authentic and natural conversation with the best in the business. So listen in, enjoy, and if you love what you hear, please do leave a review. And now, over to today's guest. Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast. Now, I am delighted that today I am with my very good friend, Will Jennings, who actually I've only met fairly recently. It's been about 6 months in the making, this relationship. And Will is today in London. It's nice to see people back in the working environment. And he has got the most amazing view looking out over the city. I'm very jealous. Now, Will is Will Jennings, and he is the CEO in the UK for Rabobank. He's had such an interesting career and spent a long time with Lloyds Banking Group. So we have that in common. And he is the best storyteller I think I've ever met. So there you are, Will, setting you up for success today. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you. Very, very well. No pressure with the introduction, but no, very well, as you say. Good to be back in the city and good to see life returning a little bit to normal here. So, yeah, lots to talk about and discuss and think about and, yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm interested, first of all, in terms of you're in London today and normally when we speak, you're in your kitchen or your office or your lounge. How did you manage to leave the house this morning with all of your children, intact and going off to school without you being there?
Yeah, the key is to leave really, really early.
Avoid it.
It's to escape under cover of darkness. Right? Make a phone call at 8:30. How is everyone? Did everyone get away okay? Just hope the answer is yes. But
I love that.
It's different. And I think after a year or 18 months or so of being ever present in the house and bringing work to the home as much as home to the work, it's a new set of routines and habits we all have to get into, which is great. It's a chance to try different things, but yeah, you leave a little bit of the carnage behind that you do.
Yeah, just avoid it. Love it. But you're right about that kind of transition. It is that developing the new habits, isn't it? We had to sit down with our children last night, talk about Martin going back to work and sort of say, Daddy's not going to be there to make your beds in the morning, kids. So you're going to have to make them yourselves.
Dad was never there to make the bed. But it is. We talk about it here quite a lot, and I think it's actually a topic in and of itself. When you're used to a work routine, as many of us were for many, many years, of getting up, commuting in, commuting home, and you get into a real routine with it. To go from that to the complete opposite of not having to leave, not having to get into that. And, you learn a second set of habits almost, but this third set is probably the most complex because you're in between different routines and they're whole new routines, and the dynamic of the office is different, and the complexity of that for people we shouldn't underestimate. It'll take a long time for people to get used to it, and yeah, it's a very different type of ambiguity. Hopefully we'll get the best of both worlds. That's the plan, at least.
Well, with you leading people through it, they have half a chance at least. You're one of the few people I know that has a standing desk. Maybe I just don't know very healthy and fit people, but there you are, standing at your desk just as you do at home. Tell me how you manage to do that all day.
I only do it when I'm visible on calls. That's the first answer that looks more effective. Do you know something? We actually got a standing desk put in here in the building a couple of years ago, and it was a bit of a novelty, I suppose, at the time. But there's a lot to be said for just moving around, and even a little thing, changing the way you stand or sit or where you sit, or for those of us still working from home every now and then, being in a different room sometimes. Mm. It's amazing how much you sit down actually that you didn't realise that you did before. And it's quite good to stand up. It gives you a different type of energy, a different type of voice, I suppose, at times as well. So, yeah, it's good, actually. I'd recommend standing up meetings and walking meetings, even better the walking ones.
Yeah, I love a walking meeting. If you can like keep your breath going, it's all good.
Yep, exactly. Yep, and it's not in the rain or the wind.
Well, you've definitely got an abundance of energy. So I can't wait to hear what you've got for us today. We're going to be talking, as we always do on the podcast, about 3 proudest moments. And I know just before we came on, you were like, actually, this was pretty tough. And this is what everybody says. So hit me with your first one. What have you landed on for that?
Right. And you're right. I have to say, this is actually it's not an easy topic, actually. And I'll explain a bit why even, is that I think often when people talk about being proud of something or having pride in something, depends a little bit on the school of thought or your own context, but often pride can come with a bit of a negative connotation to it sometimes, right? And with one of the original sins and all sorts, and sometimes it can paint you with a bit of arrogance or so on. And that I think long and hard about even what it means to be proud of something, right? And what it means to have pride in something. And I think there's clearly 2 different types, right? There's the good type and the bad type. And so when I thought a lot about the good types of things that I'm proud of and the things that have been really positive in that sense, I actually struggled a bit to think of events or things or end results. And what I found myself thinking more about is the types of experiences and the types of backgrounds or the types of events more broadly, rather than specific end results, if you like. So I'll start off with a bit of a broad one, and it's less a moment, but more an environment. And I think it probably took me a little bit of time to come to this realization, but I'm actually really, really proud of where I've come from, right? And it's not something you often kind of think about or say that often, but, and I don't mean the street I grew up in or the house I grew up in or whatnot, just generally the background and the events and the good, the bad, the ugly, the conversation, the major moments and the milestones that just shape you, right? And they make you who you are. And I think there's nothing wrong with people saying that they're proud of who they are and what they've become, and not to be read as being perfect, not to be read as being infallible, but just really proud of the basics and the foundations and the fundamentals and those building blocks that make you who you are, and hopefully make you to try to focus on the right things, doing the right thing the right way. And I think there's a lot to be said for it, actually, because often people try not to be proud of where they've come from or in some cases not talk about it. But for me, I think we're all a bit of a function of where we've come from, and good, bad or not, it's one of those things. So personally, for me, I'm actually really, really proud of where I've come from and what it's made me now. So yeah, that's my first one.
And it's real, isn't it? You know, where we've come from is our reality. And you mentioned building blocks there. Talk to me about some of the building blocks then that instill that pride in you.
I think it's really a collection of things. And I think when I look back, and whether it's my family's background, my family kind of they're Irish immigrants when they first came here in the 60s, and what it means to kind of put down roots in a new country and that kind of half aspiration, but also half fear that comes with being in a new environment. What that kind of instills in the second generation, the third generation, you see that kind of move on. I think there's a lot to be said for that fighting spirit a little bit that I think that comes from that new adventure of being from an immigrant family. We were quite lucky. We grew up in West London, and a very multicultural area at the time, right, in the late 70s and early 80s, and a whole melting pot of people from Spain and Italy and the West Indies and Africa and different parts of Europe. I mean, it really was as mixed as it comes. And, you know, you get to, without really knowing it, you get to absorb all those different flavors and cultures and all those things that just give you a different steer for things, actually. And no one can ever say they know this when they're growing up and they're 7 or 8 or 10 or 15 years of age, right? But I think when you look back on it, you see those influences on your life. I was very lucky, and we've discussed it before. I was very lucky, and it was as much by luck as design, to have gone to a very special school in London. It had a powerful impact on me after more than when I was there. And you get those basic beliefs and those fundamental touchstones, those kind of points of respect and decency and good manners and hard work and discipline, and those things that really, and we'll come to it a bit later on as well, I think, but those things that really give you a good foundation in life. And they sustain you when times are good, but also when times are bad, and things are always one point or another, right? Good or bad. And the things you can always come back to. So, and that goes through, life experiences and growing up and trying to different things. So, I think there was a lot from those early years that I look back on that have probably become even stronger touchstones the older I get, and kids and wives and dogs and all sorts that you try to impart those learnings on.
And I mean, I like that term that you're using, the touchstones, because what I'm hearing from you is we're actually talking about beliefs and values here and morals as well that you've taken from those childhood days and actually brought them into your adulthood. And so if you were thinking about what you now pass on to your children, what are the bits from your childhood that you'd really want them to embrace?
I think there's probably a couple, actually. I think definitely one of the top ones is to commit to things, right? And to commit in purpose, to commit with your effort, to commit your ambition and your aspirations. And if you really do want something, and if you really do want to be somewhere or to achieve something, even if it's for yourself, it doesn't have to be set the world on fire, but if it's really just for something you want to achieve, commit to it and really trust yourself to do it. Because
nice.
There's no, people say there's kind of no limit on what people can do. I mean, there's always to a degree limits, right? 4'1", you're not going to play in the NBA. That's the way the world. But really, there are no limits to what people can achieve for themselves and the success that they want to have. And I like to think, I hope that certainly from our kids' perspective, that we instill in them that work ethic and that commitment ethic, and also what it means to commit to other people, right? And to make sure that they can trust you, that you'll be there, and that you'll do what you'll say you'll do, and you'll be part of that journey with them. And I think part of that is really about honesty, right? And trying to be clear with what you can do, what you want to do, and what people can expect from you. And they're pretty basic things, right? They feed onto other areas, whether it's, if you're going to commit to things and be part of that hard work environment, it's not enough just to do what you do. You have to continue to improve what you do and be part of a progress as much as just doing it for the there and then, because everything passes, right? Eventually it passes, next day comes and the sun keeps rising and, other challenges appear. So as long as you're there and you're present and you're willing and you're honest, I think that goes a long way, actually.
Agree. And, my husband always talks about that song, It's Not What You Do, It's the Way That You Do It, when he talks about culture in organizations and leadership. And you're one of the one people that I know that is absolutely true to that song in terms of doing things in the right way. You just embody that in terms of your beliefs and how you operate. And so thinking about that as a lens, and then that element of trusting yourself, I really like that, because many times we hear about, as you say, the lack of limits, the believe in yourself and you can do anything. But I think that way of framing it around trusting yourself is almost an easier way to believe in yourself, but also comes from that really deep place of it'll be okay.
Yeah.
To pass on that to our next generation would be a marvelous thing.
Yeah, no, I think trust is it's a small word, right? And I think it's often thrown about quite often, a bit like purpose and other words that we hear quite a lot now. But when you distill it down, and the ability to trust other people it's a huge act of bravery, right? Because it may be people you don't know, there may be agendas that you don't understand. You don't know a lot about everyone, right? There's people that you trust implicitly because you've known them a long time, but there's others that you don't, and it's the majority that you don't, that you bump into every day and that you deal with. So to be able to have the confidence in your own position to trust people, and to have the confidence in your own beliefs and your own capabilities to trust yourself, I think two huge lessons in life, actually, that they say that youth is wasted a little bit on the young, and I think there is. If I'd been more comfortable with both of those when I was younger, I wouldn't have said life would have been easier necessarily, or success would come in different paths. But I think you become more at ease with yourself when you develop that trust in both directions, and that ease and that confidence is incredibly powerful because it allows you to relax, and it allows you to how you should be clear-headed, right? And it comes, in my mind at least, from a position of trust in yourself and an ability to trust in others. It's not easy. It sounds easy. It's not easy. And there's a lot of, for different people, different pathways, right? But yeah, if we can pass that trust on to other people, I think it's a great gift to give someone.
Yeah, totally agree. And as you say, it is that in both ways as well. So trusting ourselves. And you said there, it's really easy to trust people that you've known for a long time. Well, we've known ourselves more than we've known anybody else. So yeah, start to build that. So where you've come from and all of the lessons that you've learned along the way. And we talk about youth. You are only 43, Will.
I know it's been tougher, but it's been a tough 43 years, but only 43. Yeah.
Still young, because I'm the same age. So I am staying on the young side. Come on. So if that's the number one, what have you got as your second one?
The second one is actually a bit of an extension of the first one. And again, it's not so much a moment or an event necessarily. I think it's a trait or a feature, perhaps. And I'm leaning a little bit on the pride in yourself kind of angle, is that I'm really proud of the fact that I'm okay with learning things and that I'm okay with not knowing everything. And by virtue of the fact I'm often not, I'm okay with not being the smartest guy in the room and having all the answers. And that's true, not just professionally, but personally as well, right? I think, and people always talk about learning in terms of what information can you pick up and what things can you add to your knowledge base. But a lot of it is also, for me at least, and I'm really proud of the fact that I don't always get this right, and I often don't get it right, is that I'm also willing to let go of the things that I do know and the things that I thought were true and the things that I believe to be the right way to do it. And again, it comes a little bit back to that topic of trust again. I think if you're open-minded, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to, by definition, say that you were wrong before, I think it comes from a position where you trust yourself that actually you're able to move forward with different topics. And again, I think learning, and we talk about passing things on to people, a thirst for learning. I don't know if I was lucky or not with this, but I was relatively late into getting a thirst for learning. And I think it was actually later on through university and really into working life where I became really keen on reading all sorts of things.
You read more books than people have hot dinners. You really do.
Yeah, you get a real energy from it, right? Where you just read that passage or that phrase or that page where you just go, I didn't know that. Or where's that going to take me? You're off on a different kind of discovery path. And I think when we talk about the big issues that we see in the UK or globally or in society, whatever else it is, the ability to pass on knowledge is one part of the solution. But the willingness and ability to sit there and to listen is an inescapable part of learning. Sometimes we can be a bit too quick to pass on what we know. Yeah. But sometimes actually you just got to accept that you've got to listen, right? And just absorb it and listen to other people and other perspectives. And I'm actually proud of the fact that I'm getting better at that. I think I'm okay with it, but it's enjoyable. So yeah, proud of the fact that I'm okay with learning.
And it's lovely as well, because you'll quite often say, I've just read this or I've just read that. But I mean, they're the most random things as well that you read. So we're not just talking about, economics or, what might be happening in leadership. I mean, you read stuff about everything.
Yep. I actually read a book about container units at one point. And I can't really explain how I got on the subject of container units and how it changed the shape of shipping and global economies. I mean, that's where you go. But, everything from container ships to cod and salt and, system thinking. I'm a big believer that pretty much everything that we see, that we touch, that we talk about, that we hear about, that we learn about, everything is to one degree or another connected, right? Directly or indirectly. And the ability to join those dots, I think, is fascinating, and to see where these things take you. And, I think that's true professionally. It's true for the paths we choose to go down in terms of careers and where we do it and what we choose to do, the challenges we give ourselves. But I think from a personal perspective, it's also really, really important, because those different conversations with people that are from different backgrounds or from different perspectives or different generations, whatever it is, the stories that people tell, they're an important part of people connecting, actually. And, we've talked about leadership and other topics around that. It's, if the one thing you manage to do is to make people connect effectively, you're doing okay as a leader.
Yeah, well, and we talk about this a lot. And, I've got part of my mind is going, wouldn't it be awesome in a pub quiz, which, is a distraction that's coming in from the right, Will, but also that
By the way, so I'd be awful in a pub quiz. I wasn't putting any offers for that. I'd be useless.
But also I'm curious because whenever I'm working with people, one of the aspirations is that they can let go of the knowledge they already have and relearn something, or, that they can admit that they don't know or that they've got it wrong. So all of these themes you've talked about. I'm curious to know whether that's something that you've had to grow into, because I think when you've reached the heights that you've reached, you're at the top now of your organization in the UK, you can come from that place of, I've got there. Yeah. And, the expectation on you is less because you're not striving in the same way to get somewhere. So is it because you're at that place now that you can sit back and say, yeah, I can admit now that I don't know it all and I can be curious, etc. Or is it something that's always been there?
That's a great question. If I'm honest, I think, looking maybe at the role I have now, and it'd be true for anyone who is responsible for an organisation, whether their own or someone else's or a big or a small group, I think that the responsibilities change when you get to that type of role. And I'm always a little bit loath to say at the top or with a team, because I think it's a lot flatter than that would suggest. You just have a certain role to play. And I kind of touched on it a bit earlier on. The role isn't so much a technical role when you get to that kind of position. It is really about storytelling, and it is about making those connections and removing the obstacles to people reaching their potential. Mm-hmm. So to my mind, at least, you never really let go of the things that you've learned, and you never really forget them or completely override them. You just have them available for a different environment and a different context, where actually what was wrong there may be right here, and what was good there may be bad somewhere else. And I think you just build up a bit of a repertoire of skills and insight and knowledge that when you look at an organization from a different perspective, you find different places to apply it. And so it's really a little bit of one of judgment and one of trying to make sure that at the right time, you bring the right experience to the table. And often case, there isn't an answer for what you're doing. I can pretty much sure I'm safe, and nearly everyone on the planet, that the last 18 months have brought an environment that doesn't have a rule book. And it's not just about the physical or obvious challenges of being locked down and the impact that has. It's a psychological impact of it. It's the people's routines, their behaviors, maybe their careers, maybe their lives, all the tragic events that have surrounded that. And, when you get to that environment, you actually don't have an answer. And anyone who says they does, and anyone who accuses anyone of having not had one, I think we need to take a step back and have a bit more empathy about the situations that people have to make those decisions in. So, yeah, is it something that I've had to learn to do? Yeah, actually, because I think as you go through your career and you go through life, again, it's maybe one of the unfortunate benefits of youth, right? That you do think you have the answer, and you do think that you've seen it all, and your last problem is the biggest problem anyone's ever seen in their lives. And, your last success is as good as it gets, but it doesn't work that way. As you go through different exposures, and I think I'm a big fan of people seeing different environments and different contexts, because you see it play out in different ways. But to broaden your horizons lets you acknowledge the fact that each environment is quite different, and you don't really have a choice whether to let go of what you learned or not. You just have to be humble enough to accept the fact that you don't have the answer.
Oh, I love that. You have to be humble enough to accept the fact that you don't have the answer.
Yep.
I mean, that just kind of plays into authenticity for me. And I guess, when I look at organizations through this external lens that I have now, often the organizations themselves create that lack of authenticity in people because of the way that the culture is defined, and actually getting it wrong. Whilst on a piece of paper, it's written down as what we'd like to do. We want you all to accept and say when you've got it wrong. The reality is when that does happen, the big finger of blame comes out. And so the two things aren't really aligned. Yeah. But the way that you always talk about how you work is about wanting to kind of shift that type of culture into one of people doing things in the right way with the right intention. Yeah. So as the CEO of this organization, I mean, that's a mammoth task in itself, but how do you actually go about instilling that, cascading that throughout your organization? Because it's hard.
Yeah, maybe speaking a little bit of things I don't have a full answer to, right? This is probably one of those things where I don't think there is necessarily a full answer. But it's interesting that you say that, and I think you're absolutely right. If you look at all organizations, I think to varying degrees, there is a desire and in places a need to create an image of stability and an image of predictability and an image where it's not necessarily infallible, but it's as good as things can be because we are, right? And you see a standardization of commentary, of corporate messaging, of being on message, if you like, around people promote and say, and there's very good reasons for it. I mean, all organizations. But I think the flip side to it is that if you promote that to the expense of anything else or to exclusion of anything else, you create an artificial stability, actually. And, obviously I'm in a commercial bank, a financial services firm, where we operate in an environment that by definition is not stable. It's risk management. If it was stable, we'd have nothing to manage, right? If you look at the last 20, 30, longer even, it's an industry defined by its lack of stability.
Yeah.
How do you create stability in a world that isn't stable and you're not on solid footings? And the only way to do it, in my view at least, is that we don't give people a false comfort that this is the way it is and things are going to be fine and the world will always be flat and the rivers will never kind of move again. It's prepare people for the reality that we face. And that reality is that it is volatile and it is unpredictable. It can be very short term at times. But if you enable people maybe to come back to the original things you're proud of in the first instance, if you give people the right fundamental values and if you give people the right tooling, and that sounds a bit consultancy speak, the right tooling, but by which I mean the right skill sets, soft skills as well as technical skills, and you really encourage them to do the right thing the right way, then, as I'm fond of saying, the result will take care of itself, right? And if you make sure you look after yourself, that you're the best that you can be, that you're delivering on your potential, the result will take care of itself. And it allows people to be flexible because they're not locked into this mindset of this box will always be square, because it won't always be square. There won't always be a lid and there won't always be corners. Be sure people can move around within that. They still need a box because you need boundaries and you need that space in which you can operate. But be honest with people. I mean, anyone who thinks the world is always going to go north from a growth perspective has not been reading the news for the last 150 years. So be clear, enable, support, and let people be open about the fears and aspirations and but buy into it.
Nice. And recognise that fears and aspirations are normal.
Human nature. It is what
it
is.
Absolutely.
And we can talk about the workplace and organisations, big or small, but it's for everyday interaction. We've all got fears and dreams and things that keep us awake at night. And, you come back to those touchstones, as we call them. You've got a place where you can start again from. And everyone has to start again at some point. That's just the cycle of life. And the people are prepared and comfortable. And as I say, that they trust themselves, that they'll be okay to get back up again. I think that's as much as you can do when you're passing on the jersey to someone.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. And I think that recognition that sometimes it's hard, that sometimes we need that brutal honesty, and that sometimes the fears and the doubts are going to come in is so key. Got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about this generally at the moment. And I've actually fallen into this trap myself in the early kind of setup of my coaching world. Eliminate self-doubt, get rid of fear. And actually, the reality is you can't do that because we're set up to feel those things instinctively. And therefore, it's about strategies or tooling to manage those things, but know that they're going to be there. Because I think what society's doing at the moment is actually setting us up to feel like we're failing, because I should be able to eliminate these things, and actually I'm still feeling them. So there must be something wrong with me.
Well, it's the big challenge, right? I think certainly for kids coming through and teenagers and so on, and I forget which generation we're up to now, X or Z or some other new alphabet. But I think it's a real challenge, right? Because when our parents were younger, when we were younger, we didn't have that immediacy of social media. And I touched on a bit earlier on, the artificial construct that we put around our lives, where we try to immunize all of our children from every fear and danger, and don't climb the tree, you might hurt yourself, and don't do this, or wash your hands a million times a day because you might get germs. Well, the reality is life is like that, right? And it's true as you get older and organizations face it, you can't control that risk. You can put in some mitigants around it, but you can't buy in and you can't eliminate it. You need to be able to prepare for it. You need to be able to, if you can, preempt it. And if you can, great. Good luck with the billions that you make at some point in your life, because you will. You can preempt all the things that come our way. But you need to be prepared to respond to it. And for me, at least, everyone's going to have to face some challenge of that type. And the more we dispel the notion that there's no risk and there's no danger and there's no challenges and there's no difficult times, not to be kind of dark mooded about the whole thing, it's just the reality, right? That I think it makes people stronger, because rather than fear the future and fear the uncertainty, they learn to embrace it and the opportunity to shape it and the opportunity to be part of what it becomes. And I think that's where we look not just to our generation or generations before or generations that will follow, is that they take that positive step to shape the environment that they're in and the environment they pass on. Because if we don't step forward to do it deliberately, then it's going to happen by accident, and that typically doesn't end well. That's the general
Absolutely.
Rule. Make it as good as you can be and accept it. Just because it's not perfect doesn't mean it's wrong.
So accept that there's going to be fear, risk, doubt, learn to manage it, and it builds resilience, is what we're saying. From that place of being a learn it all. And I just have to say at this point that, spoken like a true CRO, because before you took the position as CEO, you were actually Chief Risk Officer, weren't you? You could so tell then in how you just described that.
And actually, when I was a Chief Risk Officer, I say was as if it's a distant memory, it's only about 9 months, we had a staff event here at one point, and I can't remember if it was me or someone else described me as the chief optimist, actually, because despite acknowledging that all of these challenges and so on exist, that they're not in and of themselves negatives, right? They're just how things evolve. And I'm a big believer in the ability of people not just to survive these things, but to thrive within them. And they create opportunities for discussion, for innovation, for thinking of new solutions. And it's often during periods of crisis or extreme events where we make the leaps forward. I read a book recently.
No, you didn't.
Unsurprising to hear, huh? I'm trying to get into audio books. It's not really working for me. But so I read a book where the guy who wrote the book described, I think it was World War I or II in a certain way. So, it led to jumps in employment, the females in the workforce, the vote being given to loads of people. That's one way to describe what happened out of World War. The other way, of course, it was a horrific World War with millions of casualties. But, we make those leaps forward during those times where we're testing them. That's more optimistic than not, I think.
Yeah, ever the optimist. Nothing wrong with that. It's a great position to live from. So we've got being really proud of where you've come from and those kind of morals and values and beliefs and the lessons you've learned. We've got this then being prepared to be the learn it all and acknowledging when you need to relearn something. What's the third one?
This for me is the best one, actually. And I didn't think the first two were too bad. This is the best one. So for me, I'm really, really proud of the company that I keep, actually. Everyone is always really proud of their family, right? And kids and partners. And I'm incredibly proud of mine. I think they're a great group of individuals, and the kids are growing into great young adults, right, as they go through their early years. And so incredibly proud of them. I think the contribution they're already making, the way they live their lives, the things they do, the values they try to live by. My wife has done in bringing them up while I'm at work and so on, and the job that she has and the business that she runs. I think they're incredible, right? And I think it's And everyone says their family's perfect, and I'm sure that's true for everyone who says their family's perfect. But no family's perfect, right? We have our own trials and tribulations and challenges, having 4 kids in the house and so on. But they're great, and they're definitely a reality check when I walk through the door. And when I've had days ago, yeah, look, Dad, that's a first world problem. Right? Yeah, no, you're right. That is a first world problem. I can't make the spreadsheet add up. But they're brilliant. But also, extended family and people often talk about family and friends. They mean their immediate family and their friends, but actually, extended family is massively important. Whether it's my wife's parents or her family or my extended family, the friends that we have, close or not close. There's that saying, isn't there, that you are the company that you keep. And I'm incredibly proud of all of the people that I'm friends with, and or close or not close to even, because they're good enough and decent enough to also keep me as their company. And so, we have all the good discussions that you can imagine in that group of people, but they're a never-ending source of inspiration and pride and optimism. And I just think they're a great group of people. And you know how it is, right? You go through life when you're at high school or college or university or work or different workplaces. Your circle of friends change, right? Some contact with, some you don't. But whether it's for a fleeting year or few months, or whether it's over your entire lifetime, everyone you come into contact with shapes you a little bit. Some you deliberately choose no longer to be part of their lives, or vice versa. Some you wish you could, but you can't. But they all play a role. And I think when you look back at the timeline of it all, and you look at the friends that you surround yourself with at any point in time, they're there for a reason, right? They're there because of who you've become and who they are. And it should always be, whenever you spend time with friends or family or so on, it should be a time that you enjoy. And when there are lots of things going on, and the stresses of work or the travails of pandemics and so on, you should always cherish those moments with family and friends, because every minute passes, right? And every minute is a chance to do something that makes you laugh or kind of cheers you up or gives you a different perspective and to learn, right? And pass it on. So, yeah, I'm very proud of them. They're a good bunch. They're a challenging bunch. They're a good bunch.
And they certainly challenge you, I can tell. But tell me about that being present, because, with family, and particularly with family and work being quite blurred through the pandemic, that essence of being present in the family time, I find that quite challenging, because I've always got a head full of what I should be doing and, what needs to be done. How do you manage that then, so that you can give of yourself and, get from them what you need?
Yeah, I have to say, and I have no doubt at all, if you ask any of my family or friends, they'll give you exactly the same answer. I often struggle with it, right? Because you're right, it's constant. And I think everyone's daily lives, there's always something on their mind. I think it's very easy to be busy all the time and to be preoccupied with the next day or the next thing, or what you could be doing instead of what you're doing now. And as you say, making the beds and so on isn't necessarily the most occupying pastime in the world. But I think, and this is something that I'm actually I have quite a strong view on, that you really need to, or at least I find that I need to really focus on those things that you can control. I think the reality is when you're, and it helps you to focus on where you are at that point, right? Whether it's physical sitting room or on a phone call or whatever, or someone's talking to you, you can only control what's in front of you right there and right there. And there is no point worrying about the meeting in the morning. There's no point worrying about the meeting you had yesterday. There's no point worrying about the fact that football is on the other channel, because you're not going there and you're not going to go there anytime soon. You are where you are. And I think even for those minutes, those hours, those evenings, those weekends, that's where you are, and that's what you can control. And you should embrace what you can control, because to think and worry and to be preoccupied with things that are outside your control is really to deal with it twice. And there's no need for that. Deal with it when you're there to deal with it, and have that organization around your time that allows you to be able to control what's in front of you and to not be preoccupied. So it's a huge test of discipline, right? It's a huge self-discipline and so on. But I think of those moments where you do say, I'm going to stop thinking about this, and I'm just going to listen, and I'm just going to enjoy just sitting here having dinner, right? Even if you're not thinking about stuff. And those little bits are good. They are probably the highlights of the day, when you just really are able to be present and to focus on what's around you, because there's always time for other stuff, not always time for those moments. So
that is so true. That is so true. And that little nugget you've just thrown in there, in terms of you end up doing it twice, you know, that's the thing to hold in your mind, isn't it? In terms of effectiveness and productivity and all of the things you've got to do. Well, if you're doing everything twice, then bit of a fool there, really. So I like that. You throw these little nuggets in and, you know, you kind of like, oh, there you go, have that one. I'm like, latching on.
So I'd rather just worry about it once.
It's like the Will Jennings Lessons in Life, this. I feel a book coming on, Will.
Oh, God, no, I haven't got the patience to write.
You know, when you've got time, just chuck that one in as well.
Yeah.
So we've had your proudest moments. They've given us a real insight into Will the man, really, because we've explored lots of different elements along the way there. So I'd be interested then to hear how you answer the killer question, as I refer to it. And this question has had so many different answers, it beggars belief.
Right.
And that's a book in itself. So in your view, what do you think the secret to success is?
This is definitely the one that took me the longest to think through. And I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure I've got the full answer. But I think in the first instance, I think it's really important that, and I found it at least, that people take the time to think about what success means for them and what it is, because it's not always one single goal that I want to become a millionaire or I want to win this or do that. I think success changes over the years and it changes depending on your circumstance. And you know, if I think back to when I was at high school, success is getting through your GCSEs relatively unscathed. Then it's getting to your A levels relatively unscathed, and it's somehow meandering through university. And then, you know, when you take your first job, it's doing well, it's getting promoted. These are relatively short-term successes, if you like, and they're part of a much longer chain. So they also require different drivers to achieve them. Some it's about support, some it's about discipline, some it's about your own technical capability. So I think if there are secrets to success, I think the first part is understanding what it is you're trying to succeed at and what it looks like, and be clear in yourself actually about whether that's really success for you or whether it's someone else's success.
Yes.
Or whether it's something that people expect from you but isn't necessarily what's there for you. So that's the first bit, is be clear, I think, in what you're trying to achieve. But I think then there's also some fundamental parts to being successful, whether it's a short-term goal or a long-term one or one maybe your own kind of inner well-being, is that there are some universal features. And for me, at least, it's making sure that you're curious and that you learn and that you listen and that you really try to absorb as much as you can. I think that you're fair with people, and part of that, I think, is being honest with people, and you don't lead people up the garden path a little bit in terms of where they are or where you are. I think you have to be fair in how you treat people. I think there is no small amount of bravery required. I think you do have to have courage, and that's not an easy thing to come by, particularly when you have to have those difficult conversations, or you have to challenge people, or you have to make a leap of faith. You have to back yourself and trust yourself and so on, or maybe just be yourself, right? Sometimes that's hard enough, just being able to be yourself. And there are many examples where people don't feel like they can be themselves, and it's, how can you possibly succeed when you can't even be yourself? So
totally.
Bravery is a huge part. I think the other thing is to be measured. And by that, I think it's to really not feel like you have to do everything all at once, and not to say, well, I'm only a success if I'm a billionaire. Well, a million will be fine. I'm all right with that.
That first step, as opposed to
just do things in a way that is manageable and controllable, and it's not a sprint, right? The life we go through, it's a marathon. There's lots of twists and turns to it, and lots of things that come your way that you just need those four, let's say, touchstones. And it really comes a little bit from stoicism to a point, Angela, and really trying to find those fundamental beliefs that you can keep coming back to. And it's probably a nice connection to what I'd say is the overarching driver that I think that gives people that contentment and that satisfaction that they're doing well and succeeding. It really comes down to mindset. Really, really does. Because if you keep an open mind, if you keep, whether they call it a growth mindset or an infinite mindset, or whatever the term is you want to apply to it, it's one where you don't limit yourself, but also one where you're honest with yourself and honest with people. I think if you do the right thing the right way, and you continue to try to be good at what you do, success in however you choose to define it will come, whether that's passing an exam or achieving a certain job title or whatever it is. I don't think there's a secret sauce. I think this is really fundamentals that I'm a big believer that we all need to go back to a little bit, because there isn't a magic liquid or a lotion or a potion for this, right? It's back to basics, work hard and do it the right way.
It's almost like your 3 proudest things in a nutshell there, isn't it? That are wrapped in this wrapper that says do the right things in the right way. I mean, that's what I know Will Jennings for. That is the mantra that, I see kind of written over your head. Here is a man who every day gets out of bed with an intention to do the right things in the right way. And, that's something that I think we can all connect to and strive for. It's not always easy, but what a great way to live your life.
Yeah, and let's be clear, probably wrong more often than I'm right when it comes to trying to do the right thing.
We all are, yeah.
People shouldn't fear being wrong with these things, because as most people who've achieved anything, there's a great quote, I think it's Michael Jordan or someone who said that he's missed significantly more shots than he put in. And, if you're a Premier League footballer, you'll lose more games than you win, and you'll miss the target. And that's okay, right? Because they're all learnings. They're not failures. And that's, you hope, certainly for the kids and for people generally, they embrace that idea that you don't really fail. You just learn. And as long as you take the time to learn, you'll be better next time. And that 1% a day, that adds up. So it's a good thing.
Love that. So doing the right things in the right way, thinking about where you've come from, that whole sort of values piece, the authenticity piece, being open to learning, accepting that mistakes happen. What can you learn? We've talked about being curious, being open-minded. I mean, the secret to success is a complete book in itself. I am just going to delete the measured bit, because measured and Angela Cox is like an oxymoron. So I'm not signing up to that if that's the secret to success.
Maybe you stretch the examples out over a long enough time frame.
One day.
Take the average. That'll do.
The acceptance of mediocrity. Oh, I was loving you until you said that, you see.
We'll go back and change the measure. Yeah.
Unbalanced. I love that one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, Will, you know what? Your wisdom has come to the fore in the lovely, humble way that only you can. You're never a tell person, you're a share person. And it's been an absolute joy to hear your stories and your wisdom. So thank you for sharing. And I am sure that you will inspire many. So I will love you and leave you. Have yourself a lovely rest of the day.
And you.
And take good care of you and yours.
Super. Thank you very much.
And so, just like that, we're at the end of the podcast. I hope you've enjoyed your time listening today. And a big thank you from me for taking the time. I'd really love it if you would be able to leave a review, because it really does help us to get noticed. And if you haven't already, why not subscribe, and then you never miss an episode. I wish you a lovely rest of the day, whatever it is that you're doing, and I hope that you stay safe and well.